This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1624, Off the Rack Reviews.
Laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek. Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is...
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Peter Epperly.
Oh, shit. See, we didn't practice the order. I'm Bat RIOS.
He's Peter.
Sorry about that, Chris. I didn't know what the order was.
No sweat, brother. Just glad you're here.
I knew it was going to happen. I was waiting.
He's the podcaster we deserve, but not the podcaster we need right now.
I'm a poor fill-in for Danny.
Well, yeah, you don't have boobs. I mean...
Oh, I have boobs. I'm just trying to work them off.
People are wondering what that guffawing is in the background there. Who is that?
That's our ghost. A ghost! Well, welcome to the show. This episode of Comic Geek Speak is brought to you by the fine folks at superherostuff.com, where you go to for all of your...
Superhero stuff!
Oh, they're going to be so mad at us.
Oh, how we missed that.
Visit their website, superherostuff.com, for all of your superhero stuff. Currently, at the top of their page, they have 12% off orders of $35 with the code AUTUMN12. Their codes change frequently. They have plenty of specials. There's 300 t-shirts and socks marked down 10 to 20% off. There's all kinds of hero boxes. There's a Mystic Box of Mysteries for Doctor Strange, a Villains Mystery Box. There is a Halloween costume shop gearing up for the Halloween season. There's Oktoberfest pint glasses, 15% off, which I'm going to Oktoberfest tomorrow. Woo-woo. There's stylish ties, a whole Doctor Strange shop with the movie coming up, exclusives for their website, and Legends of the CW DC TV Mystery Box. Plenty of other paraphernalia from TV, movies, science fiction, superheroes. Check out. They have an endless supply of geekery goodness for anybody that you think would enjoy it. That's superherostuff.com. Check out their stuff. Look for their specials. Sign up for their email list. They got plenty of coupons coming out all the time. Superherostuff.com, where you go to for all of your...
Superhero stuff!
I didn't want to blast everybody out here, and we should do it in a round. That way it sounds echoey.
Superhero.
Stuff.com.
Cool little reverb effect. I like it.
Superhero. Yeah, that would work. All right.
You're doing it from the CGS Newscopter.
There's that phantom laugh again.
That ghost is enjoying himself.
Well, he's here with me, so I tickled his feather. All right, this episode...
I think that ghost is having some convulsions. Are you all right?
There's just no way that he can be that quiet. There's just no possible way. That laugh is infectious. It's going to be heard. This episode, we're doing Off the Racks from, what was it, August?
August, that's correct, yep.
It is two DCs and an independent. DC is Deathstroke Rebirth 1, Superwoman Rebirth 1, and Killer Be Killed. Is that correct?
That's correct, from Image, yep.
From Image. Chris, go ahead, first up.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to start, if we could, with Killer Be Killed by Ed Brubaker, the great team of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and Elizabeth Breitweiser from Image, Killer Be Killed #1. Shane, do you have a solicitation there to read, perhaps, or no?
That I don't have. The Ghost usually has that. So I don't have that.
I can riff that. So,
okay, riff that.
And again, obviously, spoilers, and all these individual issues we're going to be addressing. This is a story, this first issue is about a young man who, for reasons we're going to get into, becomes a vigilante in New York City, and the ramifications of that, both for him and the people around him. And I don't want to say much more than that because I'm sure we're going to spoil as we get into our analysis of it, but that's that's the gist of the story. So let's start with our buy, borrow, pants ratings. I'll begin. For me, this is the strongest buy possible.
Chris, are you sitting down?
Yes.
It's a pass for me.
Oh, wow.
Wowee. Polarizing.
Love it.
Okay, well, I'm gravitating towards the Eberly poll. I give it a buy.
And Shane, you didn't read this one,
No,
correct?
this one I don't have.
Okay. Peter, why don't you start?
Well, let's start positive, and then we'll, because my negatives aren't. It's a good comic. I'm not going to fault it and say, this is trash. It's horrible. For me personally, this was a pass. Would I recommend? Yeah, it's a personal pass, even though I'm not wearing it. If I would,
I knew it.
If I knew someone, if they were like, hey, I want to read a crime comic, Brubaker calls this. He even called it a pulp comic in a way. And I don't want superheroes. I don't want costumes. But something a little bit more on the realistic side. I would say, okay, Kill or Be Killed #1. Read that. I think that'll grab that'll be to your liking. It's just not to my liking. I'm not the hugest fan of even the ones that what did they write before? Criminal,
Fatale, Incognito, Sleeper.
All ones I don't read. So it's just, it's perfectly fine. I think there are some interesting questions, about like the main character, whether you're supposed to really, what you're supposed to feel about him, right? I think Brubaker is good at doing that. Like, he's not a character you should side with. He's not a character you should empathize with. There's a lot of times I sort of just wanted to smack him upside his head and said, stop whining. And then they throw in the whole angle, his whole mission. Which I'm sure Chris will go into, or Adam, better details than I will. I just felt at the end it was kind of, I left a little wanting, and I sort of thought, boy, how many issues could this possibly run? Maybe as an anthology series, if he's supposed to go after all of these bad people because of the deal he makes in the middle of the book, that leaves it up to many an interpretation. I just don't think, or many places he could go with the story. I just don't think the main character is all that interesting enough for me to follow on that journey, whatever that journey is. But so it left me questioning how far could this actually run. So that's why for me it was a pass, because I was like, well, I don't see myself reading any further than this issue.
Fair
but
enough.
it's a competent comic. It's drawn nicely. I mean, you can't blame it. So.
All right, Adam, you want to go?
Okay. There's kind of creating the balance between the two views here. But first, I was able to, a few moments ago, run off and dig out of my little burrow here in Stone Harbor my copy of the August previews. So I can now provide the solicitations that the delinquent ghost is not going to be giving us.
Thanks, honey.
So here we go. Kill or Be Killed #1, the best-selling team of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, the fade-out criminal Fatale, launched their new monthly series Kill or Be Killed, the twisted story of a young man who is forced to kill bad people and how he struggles to keep his secret as it slowly ruins his life and the lives of his friends and loved ones. Both a thriller and a deconstruction of vigilantism, Kill or Be Killed is unlike anything Brubaker and Phillips have ever done. All right. Well, let me say up front that I am, for my own personal reasons for responding favorably to this, I guess. I'm kind of a sucker for stories of DIY vigilantism. Stories of more or less, quote-unquote, ordinary, everyday people who, maybe with or more likely without the assistance of superpowers or special gimmickry, just one day decide to throw on a costume and go, fight some bad guys. I'm a big fan of the original concept of Bob Burden's Mystery Men, and that's just kind of average guys playing at being crime fighters. There was that Twilight Guardian thing that came out from Top Cow. Yep, the ghost applauds, yes. I remember our Pants was a big fan of that Top Cow pilot season series a few years ago, and that was kind of the same thing. And this is in that vein too, although much, much bloodier. And as Brubaker says, it's got a strong injection of pulp and noir feel to it. The basic concept of it was very distantly reminiscent, to me at least, of Golden Age superhero storytelling, inasmuch as that it's well, it's about wish fulfillment and the empowerment of the downtrodden. It's just somewhat more bloody than some of the superhero or character origins of that era. But I'm thinking mainly of the Spectre here. Jim Corrigan, the murdered police detective who was contacted by a supernatural voice and told that he was going to be a spirit of justice, avenger of the slain, or whatever his actual mission statement was in those early stories by Siegel and Schuster. But it's even more reminiscent to me of Bronze Age stuff, because there is a definite supernatural, well, not definite, there's some question as to whether or not it actually is a supernatural twist, but there's a possible supernatural twist in the middle of this story, explaining how the main character gets set on the path of vigilantism that is quite reminiscent, I think, of the origins of a few of Marvel's Bronze Age horror characters. And we know that Brubaker and Phillips they have a soft spot for 70s Marvel. Just looking at the back pages of this issue, there's they're promoting the Fang the Kung Fu Werewolf character that's going to be coming out soon, which sprouts from the very love of 70s Marvel of which I speak. So yeah, this story is it begins. It's one of those stories that opens in medias res, where we see the main character Dylan already well underway in his crusade against bad people. He's walking around in a ski mask and a hooded sweatshirt, executing bad people with a shotgun and spouting what appears at first blush to be fairly standard culturally pessimistic, alarmist rhetoric about how the world is going to shit, and he's one of the few people actually doing something about it. And then we backtrack, and Brubaker and Phillips take us on an extended flashback. This is the origin arc, after all, and we see Dylan as a younger man, and we see the events that lead up to Dylan being put on this path and being handed this new life mission of his. I think mission was the word that Peter used. And it's... I responded a little more favorably to the character of Dylan than Peter did. You know, Peter wants to smack him for being a whiner. Me, I actually kind of related to the things that were going on in his world at the time he attempts to commit suicide. And so I was kind of drawn into Dylan and his life, and was sympathizing with him completely. And then, of course, things take this strange twist, and and the story starts going to some very dark places. But yeah, I'm totally drawn into this world, and as I said, I like the narrative of more or less average, relatable people who suddenly get the urge or impulse to start fighting bad guys, and I do want to see where this is going to go. The artwork, I'm not sure. I don't think this is the first Brubaker Phillips story I've ever read. I think we did a criminal story as a Book of the Month selection a bunch of years ago, long enough ago that we were still headquartered at Brian Deemer's house. But I'm really liking what I'm seeing here art-wise, and particularly I'm going to just kind of go over Sean Phillips's head and give my kudos to Elizabeth Breitweiser, the colorist, Betty to her friends. I really like what she's doing with the hues in this issue. Even on the front cover and throughout, there's strokes that... they have kind of a painterly quality to it, which sort of remind one of the painted covers of old, crime paperbacks or pulp novels. But even beyond that, they go such a long way to establishing all the different moods of the different scenes, and just drawing into the settings, like the tints of the hair and the rosy cheeks of people walking down the street in wintertime, the icy tints of blue and white of a city snowstorm, the blues of shadows, the black shades of the... creepy demonic figure that shows up in the middle of the story looking like something that crawled out from under Bill Sienkiewicz's bed. Breitweiser brings all this to us. And even at the very end, the scene at the very end when Dylan becomes the victim of an attack by a couple of 2x4 wielding homeless people, just these sort of incongruous carnation pinks and potty blues, these weird... color choices that go a long way to describing the feelings of shock, surprise, and sudden pain that Dylan is undergoing at that moment. It's kind of a tour de force performance on coloring by Betty Breitweiser, and I'm kind of surprised that I haven't noticed her work sooner than this, but I'm definitely paying attention for her byline in the future as a colorist to watch. So, it's kind of darker and more brutal than the kind of story that I generally like to read in comics, but it is, as Peter said, competently done. I'd even go so far as to say very well done, and I'm I think I'm going to be in for future issues. So yeah, it's a buy for me.
All right, Mert, I'm very impressed. I know we've talked in the past how you're usually not drawn to crime comics.
This is true.
So it's quite a testament to the skill of this team that you've been taken in by this first issue. For me, I was anticipating this with bated breath as soon as I saw the solicitation and previews. As I mentioned on the show before, I am an enormous fan of the Brubaker-Phillips Breitweiser team. Since I read Scene of the Crime, which Brubaker did with Michael Lark some years ago, honestly, I've enjoyed every single thing this man has written. I think he's one of the top writers in comics right now. And his team up with Sean Phillips, I mean, these guys have cornered the market on crime noir and pulp in comic books today. When I think about Criminal, Fatale, Incognito, the brilliant The Fade Out, which if anyone's a fan of noir and like 1940s Hollywood, you have to read that book. I think it's available now. It might be available now in a deluxe hardcover because it was a self-contained, like 12-issue story. Without question, one of the most satisfying noir stories I've read in comics, period. And I think it's those two men and also Breitweiser are just at the top of their game. And Mert, if you love her coloring, and I echo all your sentiments on that, definitely check out The Fade Out. This is a team just in top form. Now, I went into this with high expectations, and they were met and they were exceeded. I'll turn to the classic pulpy narrative by the main character, and this is the box where I knew right away this was my book. We say shit like the arc of time is long, but it bends towards justice, when it so clearly does not. It bends towards fascism and mass graves. I was in. I'm very much a pessimistic person when it comes to the human race. As a collective, individual, sure. Humanity as a whole, don't think much of us. So, I can't help that because, I've been studying history my whole life. You kind of tend to get that sentiment sometimes. So, I was very much into this book from these opening pages. The violence is brutal. I mean, and Phillips does a masterful job at rendering that brutality. But like Murd, what I was most taken by in the book was the main character's journey, and they continue that very well in the second issue, which I won't spoil at this time. And this is a guy we've all known, and there might be times in our life where we were this guy. You've got the female friend you're secretly in love with, but it's not reciprocated, or if it is reciprocated, it's in a weird way you can't seem to get your head around or understand. He's kind of in this netherworld life where he's caught between sort of like college and a career, and he already made one suicide attempt we find out earlier on, and I think this guy is very relatable in many ways. Like I said, I think we've all known this person or maybe been this person at points in our life. And what I found most compelling about the story was the way the creative team renders his relationship with Kira. Because I've known girls like that, and we all have known girls like this. Mm-hmm. We may have fallen for girls like this, even though it was hopeless, essentially, or maybe even twisted in a way. So what I found so compelling was the human element of this story and how they perfectly synthesized that with him becoming this vigilante. And the demon thing in the middle, again, I agree with you, Murd. You're not sure, is this supernatural or is it just part of his mental instability? Either way, it's frightening, because if he's mentally unstable enough, he's going to go out and start killing people that are, quote, bad. You can only imagine all the dubious directions that's going to go in. And if it's something more mystical, that's just terrifying in just a very different way, because that means this man really has no control over himself. So this is a masterful first issue. I just think it's just another great installment in the careers. I think one of the great creative teams working in comics today. So I give this the highest buy possible. Or to quote our dear departed Jamie D, buy! There we go.
I got to take you to task on relatable, this character being relatable, because, like as you said, Chris, the whole thing about him not sure if this is actually a supernatural event, is it in its mind? I mean, this is like a giant warning sign for everything that's going on in this country right now. Like, I think it's everybody who doesn't get help. I mean, as you said, he hasn't had one suicide attempt. He's had how many? It's been more than one. It's been
I
more
think
than
there's
two, right?
I think it's 2.
Okay. And I just feel like this is a dangerous comic for some kid reading it, or some teen, or some 20-something, and going, you know, he talks a good game in the beginning about, oh, you know, the world is so crazy, governments are corrupt, assholes go on shooting rampages almost daily, terrorists blow up airports, blah, 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 and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But I'm fantasizing about a girl that's not my girlfriend, that I've never had the balls to say, date me, and created this whole fantasy thing, or whether it's real. Like, the telling thing for me is the scene on the bus with yet another girl that he has problems, you know, conversing with, and creating this whole situation where these people are catcalling her, and she's not happy with him. She's not happy. She's not necessarily. We're not giving any like evidence that she's necessarily upset at the catcaller. She says, like he says to her, "What? You're not even going to say anything?" She goes, and she says, "You're being an idiot." Like, you can't throw that line away that someone else is talking about Dylan. You know, like that's what she's. There's something going on with him that I just think is a dangerous notion these days, and I don't know. Something about it just rubbed me completely the wrong way.
I agree with you completely. I'm not suggesting that every element of this guy's experience in life is something that I or other people necessarily relate to. What I'm referring to is there are elements of his experience that I think a lot of people can relate to, but we have to add on to that the fact that clearly this man has serious issues.
Absolutely.
Obviously, if he's picking up a shotgun and shooting people, whether they, you know, quote, deserve it or not. So, no, I actually agree with you 100%. What I'm talking about is that I think, again, what makes a story compelling is that even someone who is clearly as twisted and disturbed as this person is, there are elements within what he's experiencing that I think readers can relate to some degree. But I think because of the and when you go to the second issue, you see a lot more of why this guy is who he is, and that's where when you read that, you realize, yeah, you know, thank God I didn't have this guy's upbringing, you know, that type of thing. But I think the sentiments he's expressing in the beginning, I mean, one could argue that from one perspective, yeah, that he's right about everything he's saying, but it's about how we respond to those realities in our world, and you know, obviously. No one's saying we should go out and pick out a shotgun and kill people. But does that mean that, you know, we have a potential – he's talking about psychopaths running for president and people shooting people up. Is all that stuff happening? Well, one could argue that it is. So,
yeah, but I mean, I think that anybody can say those kind of things to justify anything.
Yeah, they can and they do.
Yeah.
Actually, the little soliloquy at the beginning of the story really just kind of reminded me of the kind of manifesto actually posted online by the kind of asshole who goes on a shooting rampage daily, to use Dylan's own phrase. Yeah, so the relatability for me obviously doesn't begin until after we get into the flashback sequence. But yeah, I agree with both of you that there's in the wrong hands, this story could be less a cautionary tale and more like a how-to guide. But it's the whole point of it. It's the journey. It's the character arc that gets Dylan from being this poor schlub kid in New York City to being
who's going to grad school and is living in New York. He can't be that terribly well off. I mean, he's going to NYU as a grad student, not even just like a underclassmen. So I can't feel much sympathy for this poor schlub. So that's just me. All right, so I'll get off my. I'm
schlubbier than you are, Peter. So I feel the sympathy.
All right. Well, I don't know.
We could also talk. I mean, as we mentioned, like a how-to. I think for me, I'm never one to say that a piece of media is necessarily the catalyst for someone going off and doing something heinous. Usually people are doing that. Well, not usually, but I think always. They have obviously other things going on inside them that it could be a comic they read, it could be a song they heard, it could be something happening in their house. I mean, that they're gonna be set off or what have you. So
it's the demon.
Yeah, in this case, possibly, yes.
Well, I mean, that's the metaphor for everything that sets someone. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. It's a comic. It's like you said, it's somebody just says something to you the wrong way on the wrong day.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all had road rage. I get that. we're all one road rage away from becoming a story on the ABC News, but
Granted. I think the other comment I wanted before we move on is just, and I think what I like so much about the opening page, I just think nobody writes in comics right now sort of the noir narrative better than Brubaker. And you're right. A lot of this you can see in the manifesto, whether it's true or not. But man, the language he just so captures a feeling and just sets a scene so well. I love this team. This is one of my favorite creative teams. So, all right. If you don't mind, if we could do Deathstroke, because unfortunately I have to leave relatively soon. I apologize for that.
Go for
it. Murd, fire away with the solicitation.
Will do. Deathstroke Rebirth number 1, written by Christopher Priest, art by Carlo Pagulian and Jason Paz. 1,000 enemies, 1,000 kills. Deathstroke is the world's greatest assassin. Stalked by an unseen foe, Slade Wilson is confronted by his own troubled past and challenged to reinvent himself before he loses everything and everyone in his life. Can Deathstroke be redeemed, or will his addiction to violence destroy him?
All right, Peter, your rating?
This is a buy for me, a borrow for if I had to recommend it to the audience.
Okay. Murd?
Yeah, kind of a low buy for me.
Shane?
I'd say the same. It's a buy for me, but I don't know that everybody would get it if they don't know the character a little bit.
I echo your sentiment. It's very much a buy for me, but Shane, I totally agree with what you just said there when it comes to accessibility.
Yeah.
So, all right. Do you guys mind if I start only because I have to leave?
Go ahead.
Yeah, do it.
I apologize for that.
Plus, it's Christopher Priest, who we like, so,
Indeed. So, obviously, the minute I heard that Priest was returning to comics and writing a character I think he's very much born to write, it's Deathstroke. So I was jazzed beyond words to read this. And within the first few pages, I wasn't disappointed. What I think Priest does very well here is he really explores the impact of Deathstroke's life, which has been done before as well, of course, not to take away from other creators, but on his family, on his past, and on his children, both of whom we know will grow up to be significant characters in their own right in different ways in the DC universe. And again, I'm a sucker for, because I think no one does like geopolitical drama better than Priest. But to be fair, as Shane was saying, sometimes that can make his stories, certainly in the beginning, maybe a little impenetrable for some people. But this is right in my wheelhouse. My son Ricky read this, and I know he's a little confused with it, and then he read it again. But just the relationship he has with this despot who's running this country, who he has a contract with. There's political maneuvering going on behind the scenes, which I think no one does that better than Priest. And just how Priest expertly syncs up this story of in the past about Slade hunting with his children, and then tying that into his experiences on this mission he's in. I thought was seamlessly well done. I loved how they brought the Clock King into it. That I wasn't expecting that, but yet it worked. And what I'm most excited about, and they go into this even more in future issues, which we're not going to talk about here, is really emphasize the dynamic between Slade and Wintergreen, which I think is such an interesting relationship. And it's clear as from subsequent issues that Priest really is going to go into that heavily. And plus, they used a code name that's the town my store is in. So,
I wondered how you'd react to people, like twice in the story, looking out of the panel at the reader and whispering, Kenilworth.
Yeah, I got a charge out of that because,
14 South Michigan Avenue.
And, who knows why he chose that particular name, but it's in a Christopher Priest comic, so that was a little thrill for me. Art I thought was beautiful. Combat scenes very well delineated. I thought it was an excellent opening issue. But I understand what Shane is saying. I'm going to guess what Peter might say as well, if I may be so bold, is that if you don't know a lot about Deathstroke, and if you don't sort of have the right sort of ear for how Priest tells a story, especially when he starts a story, this may be a little impenetrable for you. But what I would say is stay with it, because there's going to be a payoff, because that as a writer, he's never let me down when it comes to that. And already in the next few issues, you start to see how everything is going to come together. But I think what's most important here is that we're going to explore the consequences of Slade's life on the people around him who love him and who he loves. So this is very much a buy for me. Peter, how about you?
Me next. This is a character obviously near and dear to my heart, and was born out of a book that was all about family. Every villain, every conflict, most of the conflicts in New Teen Titans by Wolfman and Perez were started because it was somebody's sister or somebody's father, or so there was all these family connections back to the Titans. And that's something with Deathstroke's character that eventually would become also part of the whole Titans universe thing. I found it a little light. It was a quick read, even sort of light for Priest. It was over, and I thought, oh, okay, no, yeah, it's definitely a zero issue, a Rebirth one-shot issue. It's not the first issue of the series. It's meant to sort of tease you in, and they definitely do tease you in, but it felt a little light. The artwork I thought was really great. I enjoyed several of the shots of Deathstroke. It's funny, all three of the books on today's episode have flashbacks. That storytelling device of just throwing us in the middle and flashing us back and catching us up. Of the three, I think Superwoman does the best of it. But as you said, I'm in it for the long game because with Priest you do get a long game, and on one hand I kind of went in it and thought, okay, it's Priest being Priest. I thought maybe we would see something new from him, but not to say I don't appreciate that storytelling that he does with the little black caption boxes, and you have to figure out why this chapter is called Bear, why this chapter is called Whelan's, and stuff like that, which is kind of fun. His dialogue with his sons felt off to me. I thought he was a little more brusque than I'm used to Deathstroke being, even when he was shown at that age. But, that's me just reading the character 30 years ago and now reading it now, and there's been changes. I'm definitely the hypocrite because as much as I went in on Dylan in the previous book we talked about and how much he made my skin crawl, here's a character that does the same thing. Was born out of the generation of Death Wish and Punisher and all that 70s, who's the Clint Eastwood character? Dirty Harry. Yeah, and so is Dylan. Dylan's just a legacy character to all of that. And yet Deathstroke is my boy. But it also has to do with Kill or Be Killed is a comic book that you could hold up while you're reading it and put it down and would match the world you live in. Whereas this is, well, except for the demon thing, if it's true. Whereas this is DC Universe comic book stuff, and I don't know. Maybe the difference is I understand the difference more than I trust other people might. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, I'm being totally hypocritical about rooting for one and not for the other. Whatever, deal with it. But yeah, as you said, Christopher Priest writing any comic. Welcome, Christopher Priest. Yes, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to read it. I would say if someone wants to give it a try, get a number of issues to buy first, so you can see a little bit more of the payoff.
I think that's a good suggestion, Peter.
And I'm done.
All right, I have to depart, Jen. I'm going to try to get back, though, so if I do, I will contact you.
Okay.
But forgive me, I have to go do parent pickup duty. So,
okay.
But hopefully I'll be back with you very shortly.
All right.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao, bella. I don't know near as much about Deathstroke as Peter would, or Chris, but I know enough that I understood the story without a problem, but I do think it can be inaccessible if you don't have an inkling about it. It can seem a little bit hard to get into. I agree with what both Chris and Peter said about you get a payoff with Priest if you stick it in for a little bit, for at least a story arc or something. So I think if you're going to try it and pick up the next few issues to see where he goes with some of the stuff he begins in here. I absolutely loved the Clock King in there. awkward, strange character to have right in the middle of it. But boy, well placed, well put, and very intriguing to have him in there like that. It just surprised me in a very pleasant way. I flipping the page, I'm like, oh, the guy's in pajamas. That looks like the clock. Oh, it is the clocking. Oh, wow. So that was really cool for me to read. I agree, Peter. From what I know of Deathstroke, he seemed a little bit harsh on his kids, even from what I remember seeing about it. But, new DC Universe, he probably is more of a jackass, as the book says repeatedly from various characters how much of a jackass he is. Which I thought was interesting, too. That was an underlying theme. Every scene had him almost every scene, I think, had him being referred to as jackass. Like somebody was disgruntled with something he was doing or saying at every step of the way. But it was an interesting look at his life with his kids young in Wintergreen, and then to have the payoff at the end of the issue with where he was going and seeing Wintergreen. I really enjoyed the issue. I don't know that I'm in it issue to issue for the long haul. I think, like so many things now, Priest writes great for the trade, and I don't mind that. I'm still reading his Black Panther stuff, which Chris and Peter's talked about for years, and Chris got me the volumes of it. So he definitely writes for the long game and gives a payoff, just like Robinson did in Starman. There is a payoff to it. So I don't know that I'll go issue to issue, but I'll definitely go trade to trade. The artwork was very well done. I loved the facial expressions that various characters had throughout. I really took note that the artist really put some effort into the facial expressions and the meaning of what was going on in the scenes. So I appreciated and enjoyed that very much. Just an interesting way to storytell the beginning issue of a Deathstroke story with the flashbacks, the flash forwards, the present day stuff, everything that was going on. It just worked very well together. And I'm very interested to see what happens next. But I totally agree. It's the long haul. It's the end game that you got to wait for to see where he comes through all these stories and brings them all together in a head.
I love that shot on him on the boat, the full splash page.
Yeah.
Him in costume on the boat. That's a nice page. Art-wise, color-wise, detail, inks, all of it.
And the way that costume is, because in this issue, towards the back, there's an advertisement for the action figures that DC's putting out, and it's him in his more classic costume that we know of with the big orange piratey boots and all that. And I love that costume, but this one you really get a good sense where I didn't like the way he came across in the New 52 first years ago when they first introduced his costume. But I like the way this one looks. This looks very, very Dreadnought, very Zartan-ish since he's on the boat in the middle of a river. It just evoked some Dreadnoughts from G.I. Joe to me a little bit. But it's a great way. I always like, and this probably is not meant this way, but I like when they put villains in a tilted manner, like in the old 60s Batman cartoon. Like, I just appreciate that for me, my own little fanboyness about it. I just thought it was a neat, very well done splash page to see his whole costume. He's the front of the boat looking out for stuff. It was just well done. I totally agree with that, Peter. But yeah, I think it's a very good read, and I'm very curious to see where they go with Deathstroke in this. And after reading some Black Panther, this was a great read by Priest.
Well, then let us all lift our voices in unison then to welcome Priest back to a regular gig in the medium. Yes, I'm very glad to see Priest writing anything, so I was more than happy to try this comic. And it certainly doesn't disappoint for those of you who know the conventions of Priest's work. His style. As Peter said, this does give you some of the things that he injects into his work. As a matter of course, those black and white chapter title cards are in there. I'm not surprised that Chris said his son Ricky had a little trouble. He was a little confused by this issue. I mean, it's probably for reasons beyond just unfamiliarity with the DC Universe or the New 52 DC Universe. Priest is not the easiest read. He's a rewarding read, but not the easiest. He embraces nonlinear narrative. He doesn't always spoon-feed you all the exposition that you need to understand what's going on, like Slade and all of his double and triple dealings and crosses between Jazaki and Clock King and the people who hired him to kill Clock King. Priest makes you work a little harder to enjoy the things that he writes. But again, the payoff is certainly there. I appreciated the sporadic flashbacks to Slade's early days as a father, seeing his relationship with his two sons, where we learn once and for all that Slade is, or at least the New 52 version of Slade, is absolutely as crappy a father as he is a human being. Peter identifies the theme of family, and apparently that's something the priest has picked up on too. He's certainly giving it to us here in a strong dose. And those scenes with Slade and his boys was also pretty brilliant false foreshadowing for the reveal at the end of the issue, where we discover that the family member he's going to rescue is not at all whom we've been led to believe. And let me just join everybody else in being thrilled that the Clock King puts in that surprise appearance in the middle. And it's not just any Clock King either. It's not like Temple Fugit from the Batman animated series. It's not one of the latter-day versions to try to revamp the Clock King and make him cooler or whatever. He's very clearly the Silver Age Clock King, William Tachman, wearing his sky blue jammy jams with the clock faces on it and the green cape. And right down to the degenerative disease that's killing him. Because if you remember, his origin story was originally he was a clockmaker who turned to crime because he thought he was dying of a degenerative disease and he wanted to put some money in trust for his sister or whatever. So here he is, the disease is back and he's actually dying of it this time. And he just lies around and he gloomily philosophizes about the nature of time, spouts a few aphorisms about it. And I love the dialogue that Priest gives to the poor old dying king of clocks. And it's just a great little device there. The last character you would expect to pop up in the middle of a Deathstroke comic. Yeah, and I tell you what, if I could only be guaranteed that there would be random Silver Age villain cameos in every single issue of this series, I would subscribe right now. So yeah, this is absolutely a well-done, well-made comic. The turn here, the slightly hypocritical turn for me, it was Peter's turn to be hypocritical with Kill or Be Killed, now it's my turn, is that I have never, Deathstroke is a great villain in my book, but I have never enjoyed or cared about a single comic that Deathstroke has appeared in as a protagonist. Never liked his series from the 90s, and never really got into any of his other attempts at having a series after that. If he's a villain, I think he works really well, but I just get turned off by reading stories, the protagonist of which is just a guy who goes around and kills people. I feel about the same way about the Punisher over at Marvel, which is kind of the hypocritical thing is that I was just gushing about Kill or Be Killed, which is precisely about a guy who walks around and kills people. But at least it's just a testament to the execution of the Brubaker and Company creative team that I liked that this much, and a testament to Priest and Company here that I liked this as much as I did. Truth to tell, though, if it hadn't been for the Clock King cameo, I probably would have made this more of a buy row than a low buy, just because, this time, as with every other time I've tried to read a Deathstroke comic with Deathstroke as the main character, the protagonist, I just can't get into it. I can't care. That's clearly more to do with me than with the character or with the creative team. I just don't really dig Deathstroke as protagonist. But all of that said, this was a really well-done issue. There were things about it I really did enjoy. Probably won't be reading month to month, but I liked what I saw in the first issue.
No, I don't think it's just you, Adam. I think you're right. That 90s series, I certainly went in kind of I certainly collected it, of course. But I kind of went in thinking, okay. And every story was just there, I don't know, in many ways to sort of redeem Slade as a person. But why? It was the 90s. Every villain had its book, and they were anti-heroes more than they were villains. And they were just capitalizing on the whole Punisher thing. I mean, heck, the first issue cover of that Deathstroke series was by Mike Zeck, who did almost all of the issues of that Punisher limited series from the mid-'80s. So they were capitalizing on all of that. And I even get that in this issue. However, I read a couple interviews with Christopher Priest where he did say, look, this guy, there's no gray area. This guy's a villain. And we're going to show, even though he's the main character of the book, that we're not going to treat it like an anti-hero. We're going to treat him like a villain and everything that comes with it. So I kind of liked that. We didn't get that from this issue, I don't think, but I'm counting on Priest to keep to that, because otherwise it just becomes, like you said, he gets a little bit watered down.
Exactly. We lose more good villains that way.
That's exactly the term I was thinking, watered down, if he would become the, quote, anti-hero in this book.
Yeah. And I mean, he's going to be all over. I mean, he already is all over Arrow. He's coming up on the Ben Affleck Batman movie. I mean, there's images.
A whole generation of fans know him from the Teen Titans animated series of the
Teen Titans. Yep. Apparently, he was in Young Justice, but I haven't seen that yet. So.
Yes, he was. Oh, God, that's such a good series.
Yeah,
I love that cartoon.
I like that he has become, and I even talked. I think I talked about this on Twitter or something. I have to give a nod to both Jeff Johns and Brad Meltzer, because Jeff Johns, when he took over the Teen Titans series back in the mid-2000s, he restored Deathstroke to what he should be. And he actually killed Wintergreen back then. So this is the whole... That. Yeah, I guess this is a whole part of the whole revamp thing, unless Wintergreen was brought back between then and now that I don't know about. And Brad Meltzer wrote him in Identity Crisis, where he full-on took on the Justice League and kicked their asses. So, as he should, to some degree. But, yeah, so I think that's why I have high hopes for this. But I totally understand your point, Adam, and I agree with that. Sometimes he can be a little, depends on who's writing him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, coming from you, Peter, I feel reassured and justified. So, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Ready to shoot for Superwoman?
Absolutely.
All right, let me hit you with the solicitation here. Superwoman #1, written by Phil Jimenez, art by Phil Jimenez, and Matt Santorelli. Who is Superwoman Part 1? Lois Lane takes flight. Now powered up with the abilities of Superman, Lois pledges to carry on the super legacy as Superwoman. There's only one problem. Lois's new powers are killing her, and neither she nor her friend and confidant, Lana Lang, know what to do about it. Will Lois even survive long enough to learn the deadly secret of Ultra Woman? So, there that is.
We don't get that in this issue, do we?
No, I didn't think so.
The whole Ultra Woman thing. I mean, she's there as a character, but nobody named her yet, right?
No. Oh, no, not at all. And the only hint we got about Lois's powers killing her are that nosebleed that she experienced in the one scene. But, anyway, I give this one a low buy again.
It's another one that I gave, it's a complete high buy for me. And then I guess it's kind of like, I guess it's a buy for readers too. I mean, it's dense. So I don't know how people will react to it. I think Jimenez is good about giving all the information you need, but sometimes that could also act as a deterrent because it is so dense and wordy. But so I'm a little conflicted of what I would say to readers. I mean, me personally, yes. Phil Jimenez, yes, and more yes. So.
I gave this a buy, and I think I'd give it a buy for anybody to pick up, too. I think it's a little bit more accessible, and like you said, it may be dense, but I think Phil Jimenez does a great job of explaining everything to people. So I don't think most people who are interested in reading it would have a problem picking it up and reading it. I think it does a great job of explaining itself for this first issue, for the most part. So yeah, I'd give it a buy across the board on this one.
Adam, you want to run with this?
Yeah.
Oh, all right, sure. Taking off here. Okay, well, I've kind of been staying away from the Superman titles for the most part over the last few years. I mean, I haven't avoided them completely. There have been certain arcs that drew me back. The Jeff Johns, J.R. Jr. thing, for example. Odd issues here and there in between times. And, of course, I was there for the whole Morrison run on Action Comics. And now we find ourselves at this kind of strange turning point in the New 52 where DC seems to have acknowledged that Superman is one character that hadn't been going very well for them in the New 52 post-Flashpoint era. They went ahead and did something that I thought was pretty unexpected. They killed off the New 52 version of the character and took advantage of convergence to bring in the pre-Flashpoint, post-crisis, John Byrne, Dan Jurgens, etc. version of the character, and his version of Lois Lane, and their son, and now they're kind of the premier super people of the DC universe, with Lex Luthor in there as competition. So what we have here now are kind of a few remaining legacy characters of the New 52 Superman, who have literally they're the beneficiaries of his power set, at least, and of his ideology, Lois Lane and Lana Lang. And I don't think we knew coming into this issue that Lana was going to have superpowers of her own, but there is kind of a cover spoiler to that. There's a couple of cover spoilers here. There's a couple of characters here that don't even appear in this issue that apparently Lois and or Lana will meet in future issues. I think Natasha Irons maybe is down there, Tracy 13. So, yeah, I was even, maybe I just didn't look at the cover very closely, but when Lana finally showed up with her powers as Superwoman Red, if you will, it was a bit of a shock and quite an impactful splash page, I think. So yeah, what we have here is for this first issue at least, it's kind of a big question mark going forward as to whether or not it will be. It's a dual mark. It's a shared marquee. It's a two-person shared series between Lois Lane as Superwoman and, more reluctantly, Lana Lang as Superwoman. Lois has Superman's traditional power set. Lana has the Electro-Superman power set. And they both got these powers when the New 52 Superman apparently exploded right in front of them during the recent Last Days of Superman story arc. And so this kind of picks up from that point with Lois hell-bent on becoming... following along in her Clark's footsteps, and Lana being reluctantly dragged along as her partner, consultant, and so forth. And you see Jimenez here. Now, Peter, I know you're going to have more to say about this than I am. You're a bigger Jimenez fan than I am, but I really like his stuff too. And I was, as I know you were, a big fan of his run on Wonder Woman back in the early 2000s, which he also wrote and penciled. And so I see some of the things going on here that he was able to do there as well. I mean, he took several issues of that series. I'm thinking in particular of one that was just a day-in-the-life thing of Lois Lane shadowing Wonder Woman through a day. And then that was done with script assists from Joe Kelly. And it was about, Wonder Woman not just as a champion, it was about the many different hats that she wore, as ambassador, as lover, and so forth. But the friendships that sprouted between her and the other people in her lives, particularly other DCU female characters, was something that Jimenez revisited multiple times during that run. And he seems to be going right into that here, too, with Lois and Lana, the relationship that develops between them in the space of this one issue with copious flashbacks, showing how these two women who didn't even like each other at first, as they haven't liked each other for much of DC history, suddenly being drawn together by their mutual connection to, affection for, dedication to their mutual deceased friend and world treasure, post-Flashpoint Superman. So as the two of them grow into their roles as legacy bearers for him, they grow a little closer together, they work as a team here, and then the gut-wrenching finale here, just as we're starting to get interested in this relationship between the two of them, this working relationship, this friendship, dare we say, a major curveball is thrown, and we discover that there may be only one Superwoman in the book in the future. Plus, there was a Bizarro character, which is always a big plus for me. Jimenez is doing a good job here of he's weaving together a lot of threads that Grant Morrison spun. We're seeing the Daily Star as a digital media conglomerate with George Taylor at its helm. I think that's something that Morrison brought back, remembering that George Taylor was the editor of the Daily Star in the Golden Age when it was a newspaper. So that character's running around again. We've got this new version of Lana Lang, who is, as she keeps reminding us, engineer first, farmer. Then she's thrust into this role of media personality, following sort of the same arc that the pre-crisis Lana Lang did, although being much more likable and less bitchy about it than the pre-crisis Lana was. She's just a very strong character, the way Jimenez is writing her here. It's, we're being shown that one of the main reasons why Superman became who he was because of Lana. John Byrne gave us the beginnings of that idea, and it's strengthened to the nth degree here by what Jimenez is doing, and I'm assuming by what Morrison did before him. So Lana is really earning my respect. She's the narrator of this story. We get glimpses of Lex Luthor, the jerk of steel, parading around in his Superman armor, which is a believable turn for the character in this new post-Flashpoint reality. I think it's kind of cool that they're doing that. It's exactly what his ego would drive him to do. And so Jimenez is just weaving bits and pieces here of what I think he sees as the best of the post-Flashpoint Superman in his world, even allowing a few things if not specific plot details, just a general feel to leak in from pre-Flashpoint Superman comics. Now, I began all this by saying that I've been away from... I haven't really been a regular reader of the New 52 Superman books, but reading this, to me, feels a bit like a homecoming. I mean, if you were a fan of the pre-Flashpoint Superman comics, enjoyed the world that had been built around him, his supporting cast, his city of Metropolis, reading this issue of Superwoman will probably feel a bit like a homecoming for you. It's going to feel, I mean, even if some of the specific continuity stuff, the present situation that these characters find themselves in is going to be a little bit to absorb all at once, I think the general feel of the issue will be comfortable for pre-Flashpoint Superman fans. So yeah, and then of course there's the artwork, which is Jimenez. It's almost enough said. Although I do have to say, the inker, Matt Santorelli, I don't like the artwork here as much as I did in that Wonder Woman run that I mentioned earlier. It doesn't look bad, the artwork, but it doesn't, to me, look nearly as good as Jimenez artwork should. I mean, the Santorelli's ink line is a little bit too coarse. There's lots of little patches of unnecessary hatch lines. It's just, I'm sure it would look awesome on another penciler, but my opinion is that it doesn't... It's not the best suited for Jimenez's lines. So yeah, it's got a cool feel to it. It's reminiscent of the glory days of the Silver Age when Lois and Lana were at each other's throats and would occasionally get superpowers and get involved in cockamamie cat fights over Superman. Except here, it's given a much more contemporary and positive twist where they both have superpowers. Superman is completely out of the picture, and the two of them are actually made friends by the fact that they're both trying to do what Superman does. So yeah, and of course there's the looming threat of Ultra Woman, which bespeaks Earth 3, so that thrills me. And again, the Bizarro character, another thing that intrigues me. I am definitely going to be reading future issues of this. Fortunately, I've been pre-ordering them. So yeah, honestly, I think I'm not even sure anymore why I gave it a low buy. I'm going right ahead and making it a solid, straight-up buy. There we are.
Talk yourself into it.
Yeah. Now, Adam, I have to assume that this Bizarro character is the Ultra Woman that they're talking about because she has the same costume as Superwoman of Earth 3 from the Quietly era, I think, right? With the yellow cape and the circlet, the little symbol right where the cape clasps.
Except I don't know if that's supposed to be an O or a 0 or just a circle, but Superwoman usually has an S.
Right, that's why I'm thinking it could be the Bizarro version of her because maybe she has a different name. Maybe that solicit is just a red herring, or I don't know. I'm just speculating.
And it's fun to do that.
I'll go next. I really enjoyed this issue. I, like you, Murd, when I looked at the cover, I didn't really focus on the red Superwoman there. So when I got to that point in the story, I kind of got a little thrilled thinking, wow, that was pretty clever. And here it was just me being stupid and not seeing it on the front cover. But it was. I enjoyed a lot of what the Superman Blue, Superman Red stuff provided us. It wasn't great in parts, but I enjoyed it. And I thought this was a clever take on that, to have Lois be the Superman Blue, quote, and Lana be the Superman Red, or in this case now Superwoman. But I enjoyed that part. I thought it was clever. I didn't pick up on Lois's nosebleed necessary killing her, but that makes sense now listening to the solicitation that's more of a major concern. And I should have picked up on it when they said, well, Clark used to get headaches, but not nosebleeds.
Shane, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second here, but I think you'll forgive me for it.
Go ahead.
Nosebleeds equals Max Lord's mind control power?
Well, it does.
Maybe she's secretly Ultra Woman herself.
I guess that could be. No, I didn't think about it in that depth yet. But yeah, that's quite possible. I enjoyed the inclusion of the Daily Star. I thought that was pretty well placed and kind of appropriate for the book and the universe we're now in, and not a bad thing to have in this new DC universe. There's certainly competing newspapers and media empires and conglomerates all over the world, so why not the Daily Planet and the Daily Star in some way? I loved how they referenced, let's stop showing our competition. We're trying not to do that. It was just a fun little part. I thought it was well done. I like the flashback. I like seeing how they don't get along, but yet they still have at least a mutual respect for each other's feelings towards Clark. I enjoyed how this comes out of that Superman's death, which, again, I agree with you, Murr. That was a surprise to me that DC Comics went that way, but I think it's one of the better storytelling plot devices they've used in recent years, to have consequences to that, even though they brought in the pre-Flashpoint Superman and his Lois and his son, which I love, by the way, and I like what I'm reading in the Superman book and what I read before in that 8-issue series. I still think it's interesting to see that reverb throughout the DC universe and have consequences. And the fact that because of that death, these two ladies have powers now, just gives a great story device to go here forward and see what happens. And I certainly hope that they don't write Lois into being dead at some point. I hope there is some solution for that, because I think that would be a crime to lose not only this universe's Clark, but also this universe's Lois. As far as the art, I think it was very good, well done. But Adam, I agree with you. I was going to say it too, that I think the ink lines are just a little bit too heavy, a little bit too much hashing here and there. It took a little bit out of it. I think it was much cleaner, much better looking in the Wonder Woman issues. And just a side note, that Day in the Life of Wonder Woman, I remember that issue. It was fabulous. Mm-hmm. So, I was just as excited. I didn't read that entire Wonder Woman series like both of you did, but I did like what I read of it. So I was excited to see Phil Jimenez come on to this Superwoman book and spin a yarn, and hopefully he's on for quite a while, because I really did enjoy all the plot devices and all the storytelling's little tidbits that he laid out here. And I just thought it was a very well done overall origin type first issue that I don't think many people would have a problem getting into. I'm glad I didn't read the solicitation or take notice of it before, because I think some of that stuff that was missing from it would have made me go, oh, well, we didn't really get what they said they were going to give anyway. And I would have noticed the cover a little bit more as a result of that. So I'm glad I stayed away from it and just picked it up and read it and enjoyed it for what it is, being a first issue of these two, quote, new characters, or at least the new direction for both of these characters. And to have Lex in there as well, he is, the way he is in this new universe, I still don't trust him. I don't think anybody does. But I like that he is not only in Justice League, he's in Superman, he's in this. He's all over, because he is trying to take center stage and be the Superman, even though he's not. And I don't think he ever will be. But he's trying to, once again, just as when he ran for president, back in the pre-Flashpoint, he's trying to fool the universe into thinking he is good, while there is still got to be some ulterior motive to him. But he's putting up a good front for everybody to take notice of. So I just think it's a good, tight universe, at least the Superman corner of it, with having him peppered through all the different super books. So yeah, I enjoyed this book quite a bit. I gave it a buy. I would recommend it to other people. It was a lot of fun to read.
It has a lot to do for a first issue, right? I mean, it has to set up so much. It has to echo anything that's going on in the Superman proper book. It has to create a corner of the Superman title or the Superman universe for these characters and try to define their own little space within it. It's establishing, like you all said, the Daily Star, the farm, the villains. So it has a lot to do. It's very interesting, these three books. I mentioned how, like, if someone opened this up, they could see how dense it really is. And I just wonder what a new reader or a casual comic book reader, what they think nowadays. Like, what do they think when they open a book? What's their idea of what a comic should look like? Because we have Kill or Be Killed, which is almost storyboard-esque. We have the more widescreen version of comics with Deathstroke, give or take, and then we have Phil Jimenez, who really is dealing with, like, sort of house-style kind of comic book methodologies. So, I certainly see everything you guys are saying about the artwork and just the depth of this issue. The reason I love the flashback in all of this is because I thought the way he used the flashback, which was only just a couple weeks ago prior to the story, really gave you hints of, as I was reading it, because I knew what was going to happen by the end of the issue, from spoiling it. I spoiled myself from, I don't know, Twitter or whatever. But as I was reading it, it's like, oh, it's here. You can see, I mean, obviously, number one, Lana is narrating it. The Lois is, in this version, is very headstrong. She's almost too headstrong. You knew she was going to get in over her head one way or another. There was something about it that when the turn happened, I just sort of felt like, oh, I think I would have seen that even if I didn't know what was going to happen by the end of the issue. And it's kind of nice that it is focusing on Lana, because we have two Loises in this universe, and this Lois has had her day, and it's kind of funny the reaction that people had to this issue. I mean, I remember somebody tweeting to Phil Jimenez, you killed Lois, I'm crying, blah, 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 staple of DC, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I don't think you get what this story was about. Number one, I don't think it was about Lois. Number two, we may not have seen the last of her, either because of the way because of Adam's theory, which is kind of cool, that she could become like a villain, which would be awesome. But her death also reminded me of when Superman of Earth 2 died in Infinite Crisis, which Phil Jimenez was a part of, and he said something about, while he was dying, he could almost see his Lois, and he said something about, oh, I understand now, or he said something like that. And that's exactly what she says here. She says, oh, Clark, I finally understand, or, so there's something going on there. I don't know if that will ever come up again, or if it'll be the next big DC event or what, but this isn't the last time we've seen this Lois. A couple other things. So, yeah, I love the flashbacks. I actually think they're stronger than the main action of the book. It's where Jimenez shines, as Adam and Shane mentioned. He's really good at character play, and these voices feel real as comic book characters can be. Going along with the whole having to create a status quo, we get the idea that this Lex Luthor is a businessman and a great scientific mind. He is a mad genius in this Rebirth thing, which is good. I love that we got an appearance by Bethany Snow, who is a New Teen Titans character. She's also been on the Arrow TV show. So that whole cross-media thing is alive and well in the DC universe. Beyond that, I dug it. It's everything I like about... it's everything the hardcore DC comic book guy in me loves. So I love it, and I love all the little nods to... I mean, they even had a Superman the movie nod.
Yeah.
You've got us, who's got you? And Lois clearly...
grins at the camera.
Yeah.
I have to say, I don't know why I reread that last page again. I don't know why I didn't read that when I read this issue. I didn't read that as she died. I do now, but I didn't back then. I don't know why I didn't. It's clear.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
So,
I thought, okay, well, she's hurt. She's whatever, but I just didn't read it that way. Son of a gun.
Well. Clark, oh God, I understand now. It all makes sense. I mean, she's smiling.
Yeah.
As she goes.
Yeah.
So.
I just didn't read it that way. Maybe it was the smile that threw me off.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I've returned.
Huzzah!
You should have saw. He just teleported right in. Poof! Bamf. It was like Nightcrawler.
Has everyone given their opinion on Superwoman?
Yep.
We have.
May I chime in?
Yep.
Do it.
This is also a buy for me. I think it's one of the first months in a while where every single book we reviewed was a buy for me. And I'm going to riff a little bit on what Peter was saying as I caught the tail end of that. I, too, really enjoyed just mining this for all the tips of the hat to different aspects of the DC universe, both in the comics and in multimedia. The tip of the hat to the Superman film was great, for example. What I really enjoyed about this story, though, was that it was told through the perspective of Lana Lang, and her voice drove the narrative, because I've always found her character very compelling. I'm not as well versed in her as Adam or Peter might be, but I really enjoyed that it was all from her perspective. I thought the interplay between her and the New 52 Lois was extremely well done. You really believed their rapport, their chemistry. Very good, excellent writing, excellent scripting by Jimenez. The opening 2-page spread was gorgeous.
Yeah.
The Lois Superwoman flying with the fighter jets behind her. Beautiful artwork. Just captures just the majesty and the grandeur of a Superwoman / Superman like character in flight. I love Lex's whole his own personal aircraft carrier, and how that sort of backfired on him. I loved also the Lana's outfit. Is it kind of a callback to the Red Superman, like the red and blue Superman, right? So I thought that was just fun. And again, like this book had, I read this twice because it just had so much in it to savor. As a fan of the DC universe and of these characters, now, let me ask you, and you may have mentioned this because I wasn't here, but did you find the death of Lois at the end more of a cynical way to remove her now that the original Lois is in the DC universe again, or are you hoping that they're actually going to make something worthwhile out of this? How did you guys look at that?
Yes and yes.
Same here. Two halves of my brain each had a different answer.
Yeah. Shane, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Both ways. Now reading it the way it is, I think it was an easy way to get rid of her, but it has a point too.
Now, Murd, was your theory that she could become almost like the crime syndicate Superwoman, possibly? Is that what you were thinking about, or?
I'm not sure. My theory is a little inchoate at this point. I'm sure somebody from Earth 3 is going to be involved in this somehow. But, yes, and maybe I was reading too much into the little nosebleed that Lois had, because Max Lord, as I reminded Shane, always got those nosebleeds when he used his mental influence powers in the Justice League. So maybe, if at the very least Lois used that to sort of mentally push Lana into agreeing to go along with her on this little crime-fighting venture. Maybe Lois has faked her own death here. Maybe she's playing Professor Zoom and she's trying to get Lana more active in crime fighting. This is just more speculation on my part.
Right. Well, it's again, I thoroughly enjoyed this. So kudos to Mr. Jimenez. I thought this was a very strong opening issue.
Adam, what do you make of? So Chris mentioned about Luthor having this giant ship called the Gestalt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Setting it in the Bay of Metropolis, just in case he's not around, they could use this. It's basically the Shield helicarrier. It's the Triskelion from Ultimates. I mean, it's that.
It's a monument to his own ego. Jimenez goes out of his way to tell us that it's as long as the LexCorp Tower is tall.
Right.
Well, and I also think it's his way to remind everyone he is always there.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to, quote, protect them, but to take them over if he needs to. It's there to keep everybody in line.
Yeah. But as opposed to it going astray, I really think he was in on all this. I think we'll find out that because suddenly his suit doesn't work.
Yeah.
The ship goes crazy. But we see two very small panels on the one page where a woman says now, and you see the eyes of what I assume is the Bizarro character. But the woman who said now, we see her from behind later, and she has a very Lex Luthor battle suit. I'm talking the green-purple battle suit kind of feel. I'm saying she's a woman only because her eyes sort of it makes it feel like a woman, but they look different. It almost looks like, is that Maxima? Like, I wonder who... I have to imagine she's in on Luthor's game, or maybe she's a person from Apocalypse. I don't know.
Lex does have... I think Lena Luthor, his sister, is involved in the DC universe in some way.
I think that's correct.
Could be her.
That's her, yeah. So, yeah, that's... and, Phil Jimenez, this is a book that I think he's born to write. He's sensitive to certain things about certain characters. He's a gay man, so I mean, I see that he doesn't just want this to be a typical book about two women. I mean, I think he's going to try to do something with it, and hopefully he gets the chance to do that for a long time.
Can I, if I may, I wanted to make another comment about Kill or Be Killed that I forgot to mention before, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
More of just a comment to the consumer and everybody. Kill or Be Killed is an example of how the Brubaker Phillips Brightweiser team and all of their publications really give you the bang for your buck. So whenever they do one of their noir books, you get an essay in the back with original art that goes into some element of noir in popular culture. This is an essay by Devin Faraci about the impact of the movie Death Wish with Charles Bronson.
I enjoyed that essay.
Yeah, and
Hate that guy.
all of their publications have these essays where they talk about film noir or certain actors. They're fantastic, and you can count on these essays in pretty much every one of the comics that they produce. And also, the extensive commentary by Brubaker himself. You mentioned Fang the Kung Fu Werewolf. That character is actually introduced in the Criminal 10th Anniversary Special, which was done in the style, in terms of the cover, as you see here, like an old Marvel Bronze Age magazine. And Fang is actually a character within a story that's within the story. And I think you'd really enjoy how they use that character in the criminal yarn they spin there.
Chris, I bet I would too.
Yeah. So this book was $3.99, and you're getting this one of those rare comics. This is all the stuff Brubaker and Phillips do. You're getting your money's worth because you get a full story by a masterful team, and you're getting comments by Brubaker, and then an essay on an element of sort of noir and popular culture. So when we talk sometimes about how sometimes we despair sometimes about the price of certain books, and not with this. So I just want to mention that as well.
Yeah, really did appreciate that essay. It's the kind of thing I went to grad school to learn how to produce.
Outstanding.
Makes me jealous that I'm not actually producing them.
I don't doubt you could, my friend.
Does anybody have any other books they wanted to talk about? Something
I got
I've read?
several, actually. If everybody's on board with that. First and foremost, and this involves our dear beloved founder here, Peter RIOS. If anybody's not read Comic Book Fever by Peter RIOS, a celebration of comics, 1976-1986, by our friend and listener George Corey, I cannot recommend this book enough. If you grew up reading comics in the mid-70s, mid-80s, this book was conceived and written for you. And Peter has a wonderful essay in the back where he talks about his experiences, discovering comics in this time period. Peter, wonderfully written.
Thanks.
And this book is... Here, I'll read just some of the entries from the table of contents, which is done in a wonderful retro style, by the way. So, for example... here, let's see. Classic, The Untold Story of the Justice Society. The Space Knight Rises, so that's referring to Rom. They have spotlights on various key creators from this era. An entry about the deluxe Baxter paper editions. There's an entry about the Treasury edition, Superman vs. Muhammad Ali, The Grit, America's greatest family newspaper, which you often see appearing in the comic ads, about Marvel's Fireside books, Marvel Team Up, the Hostess comics that advertises you see in comics from that era. G.I. Joe, Shane, you have to get this book.
Oh.
This is so for you. They've got ads about the Kool-Aid Man, promotional educational comic books you see in the 1980s, the impact of Mile High Comics and their mail order service, how the Kiss comic came to be. This book is so goddamn fun, and it's well put together. They got a lot of wonderful visuals. There's an essay about the 7-Eleven Slurpee cups that heroes appeared on. And again, all the key creators, Starlin, Claremont, Miller, everybody, Star Wars comics, everybody who was really making waves in this era creatively, they're in this book. And you've got a lot of great essays, many by Corey, others by people who were involved in the topic at hand. They lovingly reproduce so many of the great images we all know and love from this era in terms of advertisements, promotional books, key covers and panels. It's It's a wonderful read. I can't. There's a thing here on like book and record sets. This is a tremendous resource and a lovingly done resource of this era. And anyone who's in like their 40s, you owe it to yourself to get this book. Peter, anything want to add to what I said? Or
yeah, I mean, he's been working on this for years.
It shows. It's wonderful,
and it does show. And I think the reason why some of us are so attracted to that mid to late Bronze Age era of comics is because it feels like it's the last era of comic book making that came from a bullpen type mentality, or 80s, 90s, certainly nowadays, you email, you scan, you FedEx, you digital, everything is done with people sitting at their drawing boards or computers listening to podcasts and not exercising, right? So, but, think of all the stuff that he talks about, like with Starlin and all the people that came out of whatever that Detroit Mafia group that, created Marvel Cosmic, and anybody working in New York where you could go visit DC and Marvel at the time. And I think the reason why we love it so much is because it was the era where the people growing up that read comics started creating comics and started reaching their peak. And that's why we get the Frank Miller era of Daredevil and Simonson Thor and long-time writers on Justice League, like Jerry Conway was on there forever, and Byrne all over the place, Perez, Wolfman, everybody, So it's fantastic. It's a great resource, and he just he wanted me to write a letter as if I was writing a letter to a letter column.
Nice.
And I thought, oh, that's fun. I can do that. And you can tell from what I wrote to what he's writing about, we grew up reading the same stuff. It's very clear.
Peter, I want to piggyback something you said about that time and all those creators. I think we, especially, I know we're at that right age to think nostalgically about things we were reading back in the late 70s and early to mid 80s. But I also think as I was reading books 85, 86 and beyond, and I went backwards to get some of that stuff that this book will be centered around, I still think that was a unique nexus of creativity that was coming through both Marvel and DC and all those independents that were cropping up from Comico and Eclipse and all that. It was something that, while we have great stories and we have the same things happening today, there are great Marvel stories, there are great DC stories, there's great independent things coming, and there was great stuff before that, don't get me wrong, but that time just seems to be a unique nexus when everything just gelled together. You had the companies competing against each other, but there really wasn't, at least for me, there was not the ebb and flow of good here this year, bad here the next year. And I think that helps solidify a book like this that gives a good historical perspective of everything that was just working and gelling together at that time. There was clever banter between the companies, and there was some animosity, of course, but I don't know. It just seems different than now.
And look, there might have been bad books during that time too, but I think those bad books either were bad because maybe our tastes didn't go to them, or you would have a clunker here and there, but I mean you couldn't doubt the work ethic that went in behind comic book making at that time.
No, not at all.
I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
No. That's all.
Shane, I would echo that sentiment, especially when I think of that era. I agree with everything you guys said, and also I just think about, because I think the nexus is a good word to use there. You're at a point where you had all these great writers who were really, as Peter said, reaching their peak, but there was also a real sense of history and continuity with these companies. When you're reading titles in that time period, because the Silver Age wasn't as far away as it is now, so to speak, and the early Bronze Age, and you had, or even the Golden Age to some degree, and you had a sense that all this was still connected. And as a young reader, that's very exciting to read those editorial caption boxes. Hey, go check this issue for this, and so forth and so on. And, for reasons we've talked about before, that's all gone now.
Yeah.
And, the business model of the companies is obviously, for a whole host of reasons, so different. And we talk about that. We talk about the constant relaunches and the renumbering and how they even write out a storyline these days and an arc and so forth. And it's not. I'm not saying it's better or it's worse. It's just different. Yeah. And when I was reading this book, Comic Book Fever, again from Tomorrow's, it took me on a wonderful trip back to an era where comic books were a lot more. You could buy them a lot more places than you can today. And you can still get them on a spinner rack in a 7-Eleven, as well as going to a direct market store or flea market, what have you. And I have great nostalgia for that. And it's a book I recommend to everybody who loves comics, and especially comics from this era. And I know part of George's intention writing was also for people maybe aren't that familiar with that era to check it out, the book as well, and they should. Don't be afraid that I didn't grow up in that time period. It doesn't matter. If you love the meaning, love these characters, you're going to really enjoy some, if not all, of this book.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you may go back to that 80s stuff, read that 80s stuff, and say, what the F are those guys thinking? These books suck. I get that, but I think, to be fair to one of Chris's points, I mean, at that time, you could read the entire output of DC because they only put out about maybe 30 titles, and Marvel or whatever. So it is a different time frame, and they're thinking across all mediums. I mean, I think the one of the bonus points to Rebirth is that I can see how it spreads. Like Superwoman, you open it up, and in one of the montage pages, it has Catco Entertainment up top. So if you're watching Supergirl, there's Catco. But the other thing too is, some people might say, "Oh, you guys are just nostalgic for that age." Yeah, sure, but you know what? I've read comics long enough that we've all been through different generations of comics, just different eras, and it's rare. What that era did is rare. I mean, 90s get a bad rap, but there were some really good comics in the 90s.
Yep.
But, Marvel Knights was really good. DC in 2004, 5, and 6 was really good. So, but it wasn't like across the board. What I like about nowadays is that there is a comic out there for everybody. There's always been a
comic
for sure for everybody, but to the level that it's out there now, there's so many comics that if you're reading a bad comic, well, you're the stupid one.
Yeah,
you should be going somewhere else. Because I'm going back and reading. To Shane's question, I'm trying to read iconic comics that we all know happens in those books, but maybe haven't read. So that what I'm finding is, now that I'm reading them, like the Galactus trilogy, like the first issue, All-Star Comics #3, the first appearance of the JSA. What's another one I read? Oh, the first appearance of Kid Flash. I'm finding that there are details that within the mythology and lore of people who just talk, they get it wrong. So it's like, oh, I get it. Now I'm reading it myself, and I'm like, oh, now I see where it makes sense in my headcanon, in my continuity of comics. So I'm going back, like I read that Golden Age All-Star Comics #3, first appearance of JSA. It's typical Golden Age artwork. It's Johnny Storm saying, hey, everybody in the JSA, tell a story about one of your adventures. And I'm like, Jesus, another one. But but every now and then there's a character that showed up in Roy Thomas's All-Star Squadron, or beautiful art. I never knew. Beautiful artwork by Shelley Moldolf doing the Hawkman thing. And he's totally riffing on Alex Raymond's Flash Gordon, which I'm reading for the first time, too. So there's something to be found in whatever era of comics you want to read. You may not realize how it connects to your reading. So
here.
About that.
Another book I wanted to mention. You guys remember Cal, that Jamie D loved?
Yeah. By
Kyle Higgins. That creative team has another new book out. The first issue is outstanding. Hadrian's Wall. Now, that historically refers to the wall the Romans built during the era of the Emperor Hadrian in what they called Britannia or Britain, in the the real height of the power of the Roman Empire. This Hadrian's Wall is a spacecraft, and this is like a sci-fi noir story where an astronaut dies a mysterious death while spacewalking, and a sort of pill-popping detective is sent out there to investigate this, and the astronaut's wife is his ex, and there was shenanigans going on there in their past. If you loved Cal, which again was about a superhero union in early 1960s Chicago, the Mayor Daley era, I really recommend this. Kyle Higgins he writes relationships really well in terms of relationships that have gone bad and sort of the consequences of that and the lingering sentiments that are attached to that, and you throw that in so you have that noirish feel, and then positive femme fatale, then throw in the sci-fi aspect of it. I was just grinning ear to ear reading this first issue. I was like, this is how a first issue should be. Something that takes aspects of the medium we love, but then spins it into something new. And I can't recommend that book enough. I also want to recommend Skyborn by Frank Cho. I read the first issue of that. I believe that's an Image book, if I remember correctly. A new riff on the Legend of Excalibur, where the sword is resurfaced in the future, and it looks like Merlin's a real SOB in this version, is out to do harm and trying to seize it. And the first issue was action-packed. I love Cho's artwork, of course, so that it had a great adventure feel to it, and that's another book I would recommend. And I also want to mention, I've mentioned this before, but it just gets better and better, is Matt Wagner's Shadow, The Death of Margot Lane, which is nearing the end of its run. Everything Wagner has done with the character of the Shadow, Shadow Year 1, Shadow versus Grendel, now this is just top flight. I hope our friend and colleague Matt has been reading Wagner's Shadow work. The way he just captures the feel and the sensibility of that 1930s era, just the look of it, because he's writing and penciling this issue. If you love pulp, if you love the Shadow, you just want to try out a Shadow story, the highest recommendation. All these are very exciting take on that classic pulp character. And then, of course, books we've mentioned before that just demand to be read, like, of course, Tom King's The Vision, which is nearing its conclusion. Shane, you caught up on that?
I am halfway through it. I was going to mention that. I did sit down. I read the first 5-6 issues of that, and my God, did that go first in directions I did not expect it to, but boy, is that fabulous. And because the Ghost had talked about it in Days Gone By, which prompted me to get the issues, I have read every freaking letter page in that book so far. Such great interaction with fans writing in and Tom's responses. I've had a lot of fun reading.
Yeah, the letters
so
page is tremendous in that.
Just great.
I also wanted to mention I'm really enjoying yet again Greg Recker's return to Wonder Woman. And what's interesting about that is they're alternating. So one issue deals with a storyline, the present. The next is sort of a revisiting her origin through with Rucka. Really fun. I loved his Wonder Woman run in the previous decade, and he continues to knock it out of the park with this version as well. Gentlemen, I'm monopolizing. I'm sorry, anybody else want to be on the things they want to talk about?
And that Wonder Woman, I'm not as caught up. I've read the first few of each, but I'm not totally caught up with it. But I love that concept, not only because it's interesting to revisit her origin in what's her anniversary year, right? This year or coming up next year. Plus the movie coming, it also gives a great perspective of that lineage and history that we love so much about DC, and it brings it forefront again. Not only did we get Wally West with the DC Rebirth issue, we get an origin of Wonder Woman alternating back and forth between the present. I just love what DC's trying to recapture again a little bit. They're giving us new stuff while retaining some of that stuff we've always loved about them.
Well put. I also wanted to mention an independent creator that I think you guys interviewed many years ago, Alex Robinson.
Oh yeah,
you know from Box Office Poison, from Tricked, from Too Cool to Be Forgotten. I finally read, because it came out last year, his latest OGN, and I just blanked on the frickin' name. I'm trying to find it online now. Crap! Hold on one second.
He's also hysterical. Him and Mike Dawson on the Ink Panthers podcast that they do really sporadically now. But it's such a great podcast.
And Peter, doesn't he do a podcast where they analyze 1 minute of Star Wars movies?
Yeah, the Star Wars Minute.
Wow.
Which is really
here we go.
unique.
I'm sorry, Peter. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'm done.
It's called Our Expanding Universe. Basically, if you're familiar with Robinson's work, so Box Office Poison was a masterful take on being in that netherworld when you get out of college and you're still in your 20s trying to find your way in terms of your career and relationships and friends from the past and do they still fit into your life and so forth. Our Expanding Universe is about young couples, in their 30s who are starting to have children and just how that affects their lives and their friendships from when they were younger. It centers on a group of friends, 2 couples, and then another guy who is unattached. He's divorced, and he's still kind of trying to hold on to sort of the life you had as a single man with your friends. You had all this time to go out and do things together, or go into the basement and play board games, or things like that, and so forth. And it's just about how having children and having a family and decisions you make, whether they're right or wrong, how that just sort of not. I don't mean this negatively, but sort of upsets your life in the sense that everything changes. Shane knows exactly what I'm talking about. I can tell by the look on his face.
Grinning ear to ear.
And I just think Robinson just has carved out a niche where I don't think anybody in indie comics quite captures the feeling of that type of experience. He did it in Box Office Poison, and he does it here in Our Expanding Universe. If you're a young parent or you have kids, you're trying to come into grips with how to navigate your life, your friendships, your passions, and then also dealing with kids and trying to do right by them and everything that you want them to experience, you've got to read this graphic novel.
I'll have to look that up.
I laughed. It was poignant. There were parts of it that were disturbing and like, oh God, I experienced that, or I know people who have. And he remains, every time this guy produces a piece of work, one of the top flight creators in comics. Without question.
And I agree with your sentiment that it's not meant negatively, but it certainly is a grand, different adventure. That's a good way to put it. No matter what, good or bad, which I really don't think it's bad at all, but it is an adventure.
And what he does in the story is he with the different characters, how they experience these life changes and how they deal with it. Some deal with it far better than others, and you really appreciate the impact of that. And plus, I love how Robinson draws people in that they look like regular people. No one's super hot. Most people aren't ridiculously ugly. They're just people.
Yeah.
And it's if I'd read this last year, because it came out last year, I just didn't get to read until this year. I would have nominated our awards for Best OGN of the Year.
What's that one called? Expanding Universe?
Our Expanding Universe from Top Shelf.
Okay.
And I'll shut up. That's enough for me.
No, that's good.
I guess Pants, Adam, and I will read Our Insular Universe, our Shrinking Universe.
Introverted Universe?
Oh, I don't mean to suggest that if you don't have a family, you shouldn't read this. You should, because the characters in this book, we are them, or we know people like that.
I'm even
for better or for worse. So
I'm trying to think if he even has kids, but I can't remember if he does or doesn't.
I can't answer.
It would seem odd for a book like that if he doesn't. So maybe he's just private about that information. So, I don't know.
Sounds interesting, though.
Oh, Murd, I just wanted to let you know, the latest issue of Back Issue from, again, the wonderful Tomorrow's Company, they have an essay on what happened to the living mummy.
Oh, Nakandi.
I haven't read it yet, but it's all about, why the living mummy didn't work out. So,
well, that does sound like interesting reading. Is it the Halloween issue?
Yes, it's all and Swamp Thing's in it, and I'm looking forward to reading the whole thing. I just picked it up. So,
this is Halloween.
Anything else anybody's read they want to talk about?
No, nope. Nope.
I'll chip in something.
Please.
I read DMC #1. And
nice.
Yeah, that's DMC, not DMZ, but DMC as in Run DMC. And that's right, because he's a superhero now. And even though I know zip about hip-hop as music or subculture, I couldn't resist taking a look at what form this would take. And I was actually kind of impressed by what I found. I mean, this isn't just some self-indulgent pap of some aging rapper trying to make himself a superhero. That there's a degree of art to what's being done in this comic. It's saying something. You might be interested to know, Chris, that this is a period piece. It has a specific historical setting. It's 1985 in New York City, and it addresses somewhat directly the racial and economic tensions that existed in the city at that time. The subway vigilante Bernard Getz is mentioned by name.
Yes.
So this is a New York City that actually has some superheroes, but they're almost all just tools of the white wealthy elite, just serving their interests exclusively. But then in comes DMC, who's a hero of the people, street-level vigilante in a fresh Adidas tracksuit and shades and a snack break, who's busting mothers with his giant brass knuckles and branding them Phantom style with the DMC logo in their faces. It's a series of short stories, really. It's kind of like a little anthology. Different artist for each one, all written by Daryl McDaniels, a.k.a. DMC, with an assist from Damian Scott. And surprisingly, few of these stories are actually told from the point of view of DMC himself. There's only like 3 or 4 pages of actual story that could be said to be about DMC. It's more a POV thing. Our POV character is an alternative journalist, like a young woman named Charlie Cooper, who's going around interviewing people who have spotted this mysterious vigilante, and she's talking to them, getting their stories, and she talks to graffiti artists, she talks to break dancers, she talks to a gang of punk rocker TV pirates that DMC brings down, and so it's different perspectives on this character, different art styles for each. I didn't recognize any of the artists involved, but one chapter was by someone named Felipe Smith. It's the story of a girl named Angel, who's like an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. She is a dancer. She gets involved with a heroin dealer who also has superpowers. DMC helps her break away. The art style there is kind of a cross between Jamie McKelvey and a manga artist. I quite liked it. And so it's Charlie Cooper's adventures around New York. She actually meets DMC in his secret identity as Daryl McDaniels, mild-mannered junior high social studies teacher, although she doesn't realize that it's she's talking to. So the first story was a little weak. I couldn't help but be reminded a little bit, and I'm one of the 5 people in this country who probably would be reminded of this, but I remember the Hammerman cartoon show, which aired on ABC TV in the fall of 1991. And yes, it was MC Hammer as the superhero,
yes, it was.
who had a pair of magical talking dancing shoes that enabled him to transform into the hero Hammerman. And, well, that series, I was 12 years old when this was on the air, and it's not as terrible as you're probably envisioning, but it also wasn't that good. DMC is... the first story notwithstanding, DMC goes up against a wicked graffiti artist wielding a spray can full of acid. That story's a little weak. The others are better than that. As I said before, the comics are trying to say something here. It's making a point about a specific time in the history of New York and what was going on in the minds of the citizenry at that time. And it's just sort of the voice of people who at that time were downtrodden and depressed and repressed. And it's Daryl McDaniels giving a chance to express in superheroic terms what he was trying to do with his music at that time. And, it's actually worth a read. It's not terrific or game-changing or anything like that, but it's good readable comics with an interesting setting and an interesting point. So, yeah. It's DMC number 1. I understand that there was supposed to be a DMC number 1.5 to come out eventually. I don't think it's actually been published yet.
All right, Murdoch, you remind us. I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask Adam if he's reading Hip Hop Family Tree.
Yes, actually. All of those Ed Piskor things coming out from which is like Fantagraphics' first monthly series, as I understand it. Yeah, I think it got up to like 11 or 12 issues. I think it's ceased publication now. It hasn't been listed for a while, but yeah, every issue that's come out so far I have bought.
Yeah.
It was my nomination for. I think I nominated Ed Piskor for best writer artist of 2015.
All that mishmash of hip hop and the hip hop culture in New York, the '70s, comic books, and if you love all that, you should also watch Get Down on Netflix, which is Baz Luhrmann's take on the hip hop culture of the '70s. And apparently, he has cribbed a bunch of stuff from Hip Hop Family Tree, which every great hip hop artist, I guess, does. But there's a lot of comic book references in that too. So, also a period piece that touches on comics in fun ways.
I saw that come up on my Netflix feed.
Yeah. Also, if you like the '70s Japanese kung fu movies, you need to watch, or not Japanese. Is it? Well, no, not Japanese. Just the kung fu movies of the '70s. You should watch that too because it has a lot of relation to that.
Oh, I got to check this out. Murr, one thing I want to mention, you reminded me because you mentioned the Phantom. Do you guys remember way back when we reviewed the first issue of Phantom comic done by Peter David and Sal Velluto?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it might have been Hermes Press. I'm not positive.
It was.
And they were like, okay, thank you. And remember, there were two different Phantom comics out at the same time.
Yes, there were. And
they finally, and I lost track of the Peter David one. I love the first issue. The trade just came out of the complete story.
Nice.
So if you're interested in the Phantom, that trade is available. I haven't read it yet. I just picked it up through my own shop. But it's Sal Velluto, the wonderful artist from the Priest Black Panther storyline, working with the great Peter David. I really love the first issue, so I'm looking forward to reading that trade. So if you're a Phantom fan, that trade is out now as well. So
very good.
Anything else, gentlemen?
No, I'm trying to devour my short box of backed up DC books now that the bundles all came through. I'm backed up now.
Well, I want to say, thrilled I am, Peter, that you joined us. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
It actually forced me to read some comics.
All right, Shani Poo, why don't you take us out?
This episode was brought to you by the fine folks at superherostuff.com, where you go to for all of your superhero stuff. Check your email.
We'll get there. We'll get back in the groove eventually.
We will. Sign up for their email list. Check their website for coupons. There's always specials going on. It's a great resource. Plenty of stuff there to shop for. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send us an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillaforums.com and let us know what you thought of all these books we talked about. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Thanks to everyone who supports the show. We appreciate it. Continue to send in Muddle the Merds on the voice line or the emails, because I'm sure we'll get back to that at some point. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Bye, Ted.
That would be Bye, Ghost.
Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is Comic Geek Speak.
All right. we're done.
That was a keeper.